Hi, Warren. How are you?
I'm good, Kelly. How are you? Thanks for having me on
Good,
today.
good. That's my pleasure. So I watched your film last night, The Man in the White Van. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Do you like true crime or the suspense thriller aspect of it?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a weakness for true crime. So,
Okay. It's a little bit different take than a traditional true crime, which, usually delves like into the psyche of the serial killer, or, it's like you're following a detective trying to track down a murder or a journalist tracking down a story. So, and that was sort of what really engaged me early on was talking firsthand to the surviving victim and just hearing her kind of unpack the story of what happened to her back in the 70s, living in the sleepy rural town of Brooksville, Florida, and being followed and stalked and eventually chased and hunted by this predator in a white van. And the whole time we were talking over coffee, I just saw it really interesting. I thought it was really fascinating that she never referred to him of the person who it ended up being. She always just called him the man in the white van because that's how she saw him in her world. Um, so that to me was kind of the catalyst for the jump off point for what sort of got me hooked on wanting to tell the story.
right, right. And, I really appreciate the way that you explored the victims. That it wasn't like some brutal, I mean, it was brutal, but it wasn't like it didn't show all that stuff that it usually shows.
It's not a slasher, like in a horror slasher film, you'll get into the blood and the guts and the knifing of them or and this was, um, I mean, I really wanted to explore theater of the mind with this and play with how what we didn't see and if it would be more scary to not see what was happening versus deliberately seeing everything. And so that was sort of a stylistic take that I wanted to embark on in the journey of the making of this film. And so that's kind of where we landed with that.
Yeah, and I think it's, kind of, more respectful towards the victims than, other things we've seen before. And, that's just, I appreciate that.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, like, look, these are real people. These are victims that went through, I mean, paid the ultimate price for being a victim of a horrible human being. And I think to do anything less or to try and glorify the killer would be just disingenuous to to their lives. So I think there's a certain responsibility in the filmmaking process to not make it about the killer and not make it about the villain, but really tell the story from the POV of the survivor. And that's what I found inspirational about it in the first place.
All right. Well, I mean, what is the exact thing that kind of drew you to the story about Billy Mansfield Jr.?
What drew me to the story of Billy Mansfield Jr.
Hmm.
How much? I'm curious. How much do you know about Billy Mansfield Jr.? Are you where are you based? I'm
I'm in
curious.
Georgia,
You're in Georgia. Okay. Well, what part? You're not far from me.
smack in the middle.
Ah, okay. Right, you're like smack down middle of Georgia. Okay. So I'm based in Florida as well, and we're neighboring states, and Billy Mansfield Jr. was raised in a patriarchal family who he's got five brothers, one sister, um, and his father was a criminal and a pretty despicable human being in his own right. Had done two different stints in incarceration for crimes of sexual assault against minors, and was arrested around the same time that the bodies were found on the property that Billy Mansfield Jr. was arrested for. The dad was sentenced to prison for 30 years for sexual assault, like 40 counts of sexual assault against minors. He only served 10 and was released. So I don't know where the justice is in that. But this was the father figure that raised five sons. Billy Mansfield Jr. ultimately is the known serial killer who's taken responsibility for the four bodies found on the Weeki Wachee property and also the murder of Renee Saling in California, and recently confessed to the murder of Carol Ann Barrett, who was this is like 45 years later. He confessed just this past spring to her murder, taken from a hotel in Daytona Beach in March of 1980, and she was found on the side of the road up in Jacksonville near the airport 2 days later. So those are like his known victims, and I knew nothing about Billy Mansfield Jr. Or the family until I was introduced from this surviving victim, and I was really kind of surprised there wasn't more information out there about this serial killer. And as serial killers go, he sort of flew under the radar. So it was interesting sort of like doing research and finding out more information about both the father and Billy. And, I think two of his brothers have now passed away from drugs. And, that immediate family, I think, is a tragedy in its own right. They have, they have family beyond that. They've got kids, they've got grandchildren. And, I feel for those family members who have to sort of live their lives the sins of the father, so to speak. And because, it's not their fault that their relatives were involved in these horrific acts, but, they still have to live their lives and go about their lives and, in some kind of normalcy. So, I do feel for them. They're victims in their own right.
Let's talk about the casting because it was great. I mean,
Oh,
it was so good, and Madison Wolf just killed it. You
oh,
know,
she's
so-
that girl can act, right? First and foremost, Madison is amazing. I don't think we could have cast somebody better for that role who was really just gonna just put her everything into it, like her heart and soul was into that character, and she gave her everything for the film. And I love her dearly for it, and I'll go to battle with that girl on anything. And then Breck Bassinger, who played Margaret, the sister, it was like, she's plays Stargirl. I don't know if you watch Stargirl on Max, but she carries that show on Max, and she's going to be in the next Final Destination Bloodlines, which is an interesting note because her mom in the film is Ali Larter, who started the Final Destination franchise, and then Breck is now joining it on the new incarnation. So that was kind of cool. But her character was one of, you love to hate her. So, and I think that's always tricky in playing a role like that because you realize sometimes you don't realize as an audience, I love to hate that character. And after the fact, you sort of have to let go of it and say, oh, that's because that actress did an incredible job with that role, right? So yeah, and then Sean Astin is, cinematic legend, and Ali is so freaking talented. And they both were executive producers on the film, which was great to have their support in that capacity as well. And oh my gosh, Sky Jackson, how could I forget? Sky Jackson's a star in her own right and just brings such levity and comedic relief to the film in such a fun way, which is right. You need that when you're watching a suspense thriller. You need to cut it with some comedy here and there. And I think Sky did a wonderful job with that.
right, I agree. And I mean, it felt natural, but and nothing felt gratuitous or over the top. It was just a really good movie.
Thanks, Kelly.
And
Did how did you feel about like the 70s of it all? Did that spark you in any way?
but I mean, I definitely felt it, because I'm not far out of that era.
I'm an 80s kid, so I know, but like I
I am
loved
too.
it was just fun to go back and sort of explore the 70s, just that time period where we weren't inundated with social media or the internet. 911 didn't exist. There wasn't security video footage everywhere, and it was just a fertile time for predators like Billy Mansfield to operate, and it's like there's a reason why we have this symbol of fear that is the white van now, because of these horrible acts and things that were happening and just sort of being talked about. It's like they were like legends in a way, and dark legends. But people just knew there was some serial killer in California that eventually became the toolbox killer, or Dean Corll in Texas, and then Billy Mansfield Jr. in Florida. Um, when I talked to the survivor, based the stories based on, she just said that after her ordeal, they all, or before her ordeal, during it all happening, she would talk to her friends and just talk about the weirdo, that weirdo who, the man in the white van. um, and it was just a weirdo until he became something very, very sinister in her life.
Right, right. And I love the way that it, evolves from her, no one believing her,
Hmm.
to finally everybody sees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
thought
that's,
that was done in a very nice way.
I think believing victims, I think, is sort of something that we don't put enough emphasis on in general. And I think for a story like this, it is a little bit of the girl who cried wolf, because she admittedly told tall tales and fibbed, as she said. um, and she realized like how she sort of set herself up for that disaster to come, where she didn't do herself any favors in that regard, because she was always playing with her parents and lying about things, and she said it was probably attention seeking. um, and that really ultimately ended up setting the stage for her parents, who in rural sleepy Florida 1975 were not prepared to or even it wasn't even fathomable that something that nefarious was lurking in their neighborhood. Um, they were an affluent family, and they felt protected. They felt safe. There wasn't anything to be protected from, really. Even one of the local deputies talked about the time period, saying that the worst thing that they had on their agenda that they had to deal with was getting the town drunk home on a Friday night from the bar, right? Like that was the level of issues and drama, from the Hernando County deputy's office. So when you kind of put that all together and mix that in with this girl who's crying wolf a little bit, it just sort of sets the stage for the tragedy to come.
Right. And I know that kind of innocence and the small town life.
Yeah,
I live in a very small town. So,
I mean, look, it's great, right? You love it. Like ignorance is bliss, and it's wonderful to feel like you're safe and that you're in the everybody around you. You could and it's that there's something comforting in all of that. Um, but there's also something that if you kind of let your guard down, like this family did, and you sort of take too much pride in that, you sort of set yourself up for potential danger creeping in.
right, right. And, I think I really did enjoy this film, and I think a lot of true crime fans, which there are a ton of us, and those who are into the thriller and the horror, psychological stuff, I think they're all going to enjoy this because it does have all those aspects that we're looking for. And for somebody who me who is all of it, it's really really an impressive film.
Oh, thanks so much, Kelly. I think it's fun right now because it's in movie theaters. But we're also competing against the big studios. So we're going up against Moana and Wicked and Gladiator and what Mufasa coming up, this weekend. I think that I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of audience that's going to find this, at home in a meaningful way. And I think that'll be interesting because for me as a filmmaker, that's when they do that, then they're going to be like watching it. They're going to get online, trying to find out more information, and it's. I think something that would be fascinating to come out of all this is if there were more of a surge toward finding more victims and justice for them and closure for the families.
right. Because there's no telling how many there are out there, victims of his, because over different states, and it's you can somebody like that who does stuff like that, just because they, admit, well, I killed this one, doesn't mean there's not 10 more in a closet somewhere.
Oh yeah, and this is somebody who was going back and forth from Michigan to Florida, and then all the time, and then also traveled from Florida out to California. And if you've got a murder in Florida, or you have several murders in Florida, you've got a murder in California, and he's been arrested and did two different jail stints in between 75 and 80 in Michigan, chances are there's probably other activity there. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is sort of the tip of the iceberg.
Any chance will you be going back and doing kind of a documentary on it to go
So
with the
funny
film?
you should so it's interesting because I met with the detectives in the cold case in Hernando County after we finished sort of making the film. And that wasn't on for lack of wanting to meet with them earlier. It was just that was how it worked out in a schedule where they finally would sit down with me. And that was okay because we weren't telling the story of Billy Mansfield Jr. We're telling the story of the victim. Um, but sitting down with them at an IHOP in Brooksville for 3 hours, it definitely it definitely opened up a door that I don't think I could close very easily. So I've been working and developing uh, a docu series on that right now.
Okay, great. That's, it you never have too many true crime stories out there because we eat it up. But it would be really good to be able to go inside this whole thing,
Mm.
and have the movie so you get both sides of it, and that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, it's also very sad because as I'm finding, there's just so many family members of the victims who have not had any kind of closure. And, just last year, sorry, 2 years ago, one of the women who had remained unidentified, there were two women remained unidentified for over 45 years for the Weeki Wachee property. One of them, through the work of Aaron Kimmerly, a USF and homicide cold case detective George Lloydgren in Hernando County, they identified a possible family member in Boca Raton and reached out to her. It's like through forensic anthropology and DNA, and they were able to find a sister. And when they reached out to her, they just said, have you ever had a family member go missing? This is a strange question, but has that happened? And she said, yeah. She said, my sister went out, left the hotel in Tampa, went out, she was 16 years old, left to go to a job interview, and I never saw her again. And she openly said she went to the Tampa police to file a missing persons report, but in 1980, they would not accept a missing persons report for her because she admitted that she had run away at some point in time previously. So when they went to go look for her, sorry, when they were uncovering bodies on the property in Weeki Wachee, Florida, they were looking for a specific victim who had been taken from a Tampa bar, Sandra Jean Graham. And when they found her, they stopped digging. But one of the bodies they found happened to be Teresa Fillingham, the sister of this woman in Boca Raton, and she remained unidentified for 45 years because nobody was looking for her.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is. And it was great I don't know if great's the right word, but I mean, I wasn't involved in that process, but there's some sense of closure that I'm happy for the sister to have,
Right.
but also sad for the parents who both passed away, never knowing what happened to the daughter, and the father I know spent a good part of his life trying to track her down and find out.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking, but maybe through all the attention, cases will be opened back up, and more investigation will be done, and more people identified.
I hope so. I hope so. And it really comes down to funding overall. when you have smaller police departments who are trying to work cold cases, the fact they're even working the cold cases in the first place is a huge step. But they have to have funding in order to be able to develop the DNA, to send it off for processing, to take trips to talk to potential suspects, and it all comes down to money, and the more attention I think that we put on something as a society puts pressure on funds being allocated to that. So I think that's kind of an important part of all this.
Right, right. I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay, so if you had to describe this film in 4 words for somebody who's never heard about it, what would you say?
I get 4 words.
4 words.
Uh, Suspense, thriller, survivor, serial killer.
Good choices. Well, I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say about your film as soon as we can all, talk about it out loud. So,
Sure.
but it's a great thing, and the fact that you want to bring attention to those who are still missing or unidentified is a really important thing for everybody. So,
Yeah. No, it is. I appreciate you with that sentiment, Kelly.
it's my pleasure.